It's a sentence that, in a monarchy, sounds like a scratch on glass. I don't want to be buried next to her. Not next to the woman you lived with for decades. Not next to the queen, whose life is made of rituals, receptions, red carpets, handshakes timed to the second, and cameras that never blink. And suddenly a decision about life after death becomes a message to the living. You can read it as dignity. You can also hear it as one last jab, because anyone who says that isn't only saying, "Leave me be." He's also saying, "I was never truly equal." The man who made that public was Prince Henrik of Denmark. You can tell this story very simply. A difficult royal, touchy, offended, vain. That version works fast, but it's too flat. The better question is more uncomfortable. Did the institution make him small? Or did he keep using the institution as a stage to hit back, and in doing so, hit the Queen as well? And one more thing. Even if you understand why someone is hurt, that doesn't automatically mean you have to approve of what they do with that hurt. Margrethe grows up inside a system that doesn't negotiate. In a monarchy, love is never only private, it's always also a role, and roles have rules. When she later becomes queen, a life begins that people like to imagine as glamorous, but that often feels more like a timetable, briefings, audiences, state visits, the glance at the clock, the nod at the right moment, not because she can't feel, but because the office demands that feelings rarely show. And that's the core. In public, it's not who loves whom that decides. It decides who walks in front and who stays half a step behind. That sounds petty. But in protocol, that half step can be the whole truth. Henrik arrives in Denmark as Henri de la Borde de Montpezat, with his own career, his own language, his own sense of who he is. To marry Margrethe, he does things that shouldn't be dismissed. He changes religion, ends his diplomatic career, becomes Henrik. And he tries to make a home in a country where an accent is never just an accent. It always gives away where you come from. Then comes the moment that colors everything. When Margrethe ascends the throne in 1972, Henrik does not become king. He becomes prince consort. It isn't meant personally, it's simply the rule. But rules feel different when you're the one living under them. From then on, there are images that repeat like a film loop. She steps out of the car, flashbulbs, the first step, the door closes. He follows, not far away, but visibly behind, close to the center, and yet never the center. Many called him grumpy, some unpredictable. But those words are convenient. They explain nothing. What's certain is this. Henrik didn't keep his dissatisfaction private. He made it public, in interviews, in sentences that struck like lit matches. He often framed it as a principle, equality, modern values, and yet this fixed hierarchy. You can understand that. But at the same time, something happens that you can see in any royal photograph. When he publicly complains about his place, Margrethe is standing there and can hardly respond. She can't hit back without looking petty, and she can't give in without weakening protocol. That's the dilemma. Publicity is power. And he knew it. And there's something else many people sensed, even without details. Henrik didn't just seem hurt. Sometimes he seemed as if he wanted others to feel that hurt too. And yes, for years the tabloids circulated rumors of affairs. That's difficult to substantiate cleanly in public, and we shouldn't present it as established fact. But the sheer persistence of those stories became part of his image, not only the man in the shadow, but a figure who also produced distrust and conflict. Henrik's hurt explain something. It doesn't automatically make him a hero. In 2002, that long-running tension turns into a moment everyone can grasp, without knowing protocol. New Year's, a ceremony, cameras. In moments like these, everything is choreographed. Who stands where, who speaks, who represents whom. And then something happens that sounds minor to outsiders, but to Henrik feels like a loss of status. It isn't him who is chosen, but Crown Prince Frederik. Henrik doesn't react quietly. He reacts publicly. He says, in effect, "For many years I was number 2. I could live with that. But I don't want to become number 3. You can almost see how a family dispute becomes a problem for the state's image. Because monarchies live on projecting calm, even when there's friction inside. Henrik leaves, withdrawing to France. For a few weeks it feels as if someone has switched the film's soundtrack. Suddenly it isn't only shine, but grinding tension. Reconciliations follow, but the pattern is now clear. Hurt isn't processed, it's made visible. And that pattern leads straight back to the sentence from the beginning. In Henrik's final years, his health deteriorates. In 2017, it becomes public that he is living with dementia. That changes the lens. Some harshness looks different in hindsight, not as an excuse, but as context. And yet, before everything goes completely quiet, Henrik sets his last major marker. He declares that he does not want to be buried next to Margrethe. In monarchies, a shared tomb isn't only family business, it's a symbol, unity, continuity. We belong together. Henrik says, no. And again you can hear that sentence in two directions, as an attempt, at the end, to define for himself who he was, or as one last public bill, presented to a woman who, as queen, can scarcely answer freely. In February 2018, Henrik dies surrounded by his family, and the royal household accepts his wish. The break remains, not as a scandal, but as a symbol you can't simply put back in the drawer. In the end, two truths stand side by side, and neither is comfortable. Margrethe protects the institution, not because she doesn't love, but because she believes the crown is larger than her private life. Henrik seeks recognition, sometimes like a man suffocating inside a role, and sometimes like someone who pulls others into his hurt. Maybe that's the real tragedy, not that two people didn't fit, but that a system reminded them every day who stands in front and who is only beside. You can be married for 50 years and still never stand on the same step.